Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kelly Green Hour as we are getting you set for Week 3 in the National Football League, where your Philadelphia Eagles are set to travel to Tampa Bay to face the Buccaneers on Monday Night Football, one of two games on Monday night. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, what's going on, bud?
Not much, man. It's been a week. Thank God it's Friday, and we get to enjoy a Sunday of football. There is nothing I enjoy more than waking up Sunday knowing that I can turn on the red zone and relax. Like I know that the Eagles play late or play Monday night or Thursday night, it's the best feeling.
I prefer 1 o'clock games. I'd rather get it done and out of the way, because then I sit there and I'm
That's true. When we play the 9 o'clock games, so it's 9 o'clock my time. So they end at about 12:30, and then my adrenaline is so wired, and so I'm up till like 2 a.m. because I just can't sleep. Win or lose, my adrenaline is just pumping no matter what time of game, and I'm like, well, this sucks. Now I'm here at 12:30, and I got to sit here and fall asleep.
The Eagles are the first of the two Monday night games. The other one, Cincinnati and LA. I think Cincinnati Bengals and the LA Rams. But so the 2-0 Eagles and the 2-0 Buccaneers. Before we get started, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. And you can follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. And you can also follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. All right, Connor. We talked about it. We were here on Tuesday. We talked about how the Eagles were able to beat Minnesota. It wasn't pretty, but they got it done, rushing for a bunch of yards. Teams have come in and have said, look, we're not going to let Jalen Hurts beat us, at least right now. So they're going to allow the Eagles to run the ball. And we'll see if that changes against Tampa, because Tampa has a very, very good rush defense led by Vita Vea. Tampa, as I mentioned, they're also 2-0. Week 1, they beat Minnesota 20-17, and last week they beat Chicago 27-17, that very bad Chicago team. Speaking of Chicago,
crazy that those stories coming out of Chicago are wild, and listening to each of them do press conferences makes me cringe. Like, when people cringed about the flower comment by Nick Sirianni, or at the very beginning when he made a few different comments that people cringed at, you cannot tell me listening to the Bears and everyone kind of throw each other under the bus is not worse and way more cringeworthy. Like it. And I know that they try to brush it off and say, well, I didn't mean it that way. You're reading into it. But the way you worded it left a little to be desired.
Fans and media are going to tune in, look into things and overlook into things. Like talking about the A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts thing on the sideline. I had no issue with it. I knew it was a big nothing. But, the media is going to – the Philly media over the summer tried to make a big ploy about Hassan Reddick's contract when nobody was talking about it, but they wanted to have a big story about it. There's going to be media trying to conjure up stories to try to come up with things for themselves to write, and maybe and there was a dumb question at the in preseason I think it was to AJ Brown, and then Ruben Frank had asked, so the fans, they're trying to decide between which one they like better. What fan is deciding between AJ Brown and Devontae Smith? We like both of them equally. They're both number one receivers. The fans aren't sitting here deciding, oh, I'd rather have AJ over Devontae, or I'd rather have Devontae over AJ. That's the Philadelphia media. And that's the one thing that bothers me about the Philly media. They try to make something out of nothing. And I'm glad that AJ the other day squashed it all. We all knew there was nothing. Sirianni said it was a 2 out of 10, and it was probably less than a 2 out of 10. So let's enjoy what we have while we have it.
It's a great example
we've ever had. Let them be.
We're going up against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and never do I ever see the Tampa Bay media saying I would rather one or the other, depending on their performance. They want media. Well, exactly. But I mean, that should be the way. Okay, our media can be intense, and I get that. But the point of being intense about I want this number one receiver instead of this number one receiver. The point is we have 2 number one receivers on a team, and it doesn't matter who's performing. I could care less if AJ Brown has this terrible 600-yard season and Devontae has a 2,000-yard season, I could care less because you know that each other impact each other's game. It'll never happen. But you know, each other impact each other's games to the point that, you know, those 2,000 yards probably came because people were paying more attention to AJ Brown or vice versa. That's why we have AJ Brown games. We call them by that. And we have Devontae Smith games and we call them by that because one or the other commands more attention that night or is just the guy that gets the targets that night. And I will never complain about having two really good wide receivers or get to the point where I'm saying I would rather one or the other or ever consider that as a viable piece of something to write about. That's just you really running out of topics to write about if you're picking one or the other or trying to pick sides.
That's what it is. And again, the media is trying to conjure up an issue when there really isn't an issue. I know they don't like to have good. They don't like we can't have good things. Is pretty much what the media is saying. I forgot. I neglected to mention if you are tuning in live, let us know in the comment section your thoughts on the game coming up against Tampa, your prediction, maybe your players to watch, player of the game, and whatnot. As we will by the end of the show, Connor and I will give our predictions and players to watch. But yeah, so the Eagles in their two games, they defeated New England, and then they defeated Minnesota. Tampa defeated Minnesota, and then defeated Chicago. I don't know if anybody thought Tampa was going to be 2-0 at this point, but they are. I think this is the only game in the NFL with two 2-0 teams facing off against each other. So it's going to be a good test. You know, the last time the Eagles went to Tampa, they didn't fare so well. It was the playoff game, but Tampa's a little bit different now. They have Baker Mayfield at quarterback. They don't have Tom Brady at quarterback. Bruce Arians is not the head coach. It's Todd Bowles. Speaking of kind of, I want to start with the Eagles offense, but for Brian Johnson, his first 3 games as offensive coordinator have been against a defensive genius in Bill Belichick, Brian Flores, who's a really good defensive coach and learned under Bill Belichick, and Todd Bowles, who's another really good defensive coach. So this isn't an easy stretch for the Eagles. And then next week, you know, he gets to go up against Jack Del Rio in Washington. So this is a very tough stretch of games for somebody who's never called plays in the National Football League to call plays in the National Football League. And even if the talent is pretty much the same, minus the right guard and the running backs for the Eagles, but teams have looked at a year plus worth of game tape and have devised game plans to try to stop what the Eagles do best. But as Jalen Hurts said this week, you know, first he said, you know, when is winning not the main thing? He doesn't care about stats. He doesn't care about numbers. You know, he cares about the main thing being the main thing, and that's winning. And then he also said, all right, if teams want to stop me, that's fine. We'll rush for 250 yards. He doesn't care. As long as the Eagles get the W, that's all that matters. And that's what I love about having Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. Yes, he got a $250 million contract. And a lot of people think, oh, he should have gaudy 5,000-yard passing seasons with 40 touchdowns. Well, he doesn't give a crap. He just wants to go out there and win football games. And that's what we want. We want to win football games and get back to the Super Bowl.
And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. I mean, first of all, the gauntlet that Brian Johnson is running is like it. We understand that it is Nick Sirianni's offense, but Shane Steichen is going to call it different than Brian Johnson, and Nick Sirianni, if he was calling the plays, will call it different than all of them too. There's you know, when you open up a playbook, you're looking at 50 to 100 plus plays. And you're going to call each play different in different scenarios based on what you see. You're never going to get any person call it the same. So I think this is actually a really great test for Brian Johnson. I really think this is good for him. And it's going to prepare him even better as the season goes on. He's going to get better and better and better. And then come the playoffs, hopefully we're there. You know, then he's fully accustomed to it. He's gone through the tougher matchups. He knows what to do. He's learning from weeks prior. So it's better to get this gauntlet of defensive coordinators or defensive teams out of the way now, and learn from them. And it's just this idea of Greg Cosell, who is a really good watcher of tape, actually went out and said he thought Johnson called a very good game on Thursday night. When you're watching tape and looking at it from a Greg Cosell perspective versus a fan perspective, it's going to be very different. We probably saw it as that is a hideous way to call tape. He probably looked at it and he probably saw something. He said we didn't need to see anything fancy. All Brian Johnson had to do was stick with it. He didn't decide to go away from what was working. He stuck with what was working, and it worked. except for the first quarter. But then
Fourth
after
quarter,
that,
the fourth quarter when they went to 3 straight AJ Brown passes, but that's
and that could have been a whole. Who knows what that situation was and if that's what caused it. But at the end of the day, he didn't really go away from what was working until that moment happened. But he was calling. It wasn't a game that warranted him going crazy or digging deep into the playbook and picking out trick plays or throwing 50, 60-yard passes. He pulled them out when he needed to open up the field, and he made them respect Devontae Smith, and he made them also respect DeAndre Swift. And you never knew which one was going to do it, but those two had monster games. And while nobody else really had a big game, they did. So whatever Cassell saw was something that he sees on tape that us regular folk who are reacting are probably not going to see or think about. So I mean, when I think about when Greg Cosell speaks, I really respect his opinion because he is a very good film watcher. So I do respect his opinion and thoughts. If it was Elliott Shore Park saying I watched the tape and I thought this was a really good play call or really good game called by Johnson, I would be extremely skeptical. But it's Greg Cosell, so I guess I trust it. And I agree with you. Jalen Hurts kind of keeps this team balanced. Like, I really like how he talks and how he speaks. At the end of the day, I'm the same way. They were two ugly wins, but I'm not going to say they're ugly wins and then reel off a list of everything that needs to be fixed. Wins are wins, and we need to take them. We talked about it on the episode on Tuesday. We are going to run a gauntlet here of 5 or 6 games that's going to get really hard in the middle of the year, where we got the Cowboys twice, we got the Chiefs, we got the Bills, we got the Dolphins. We're going to run a gauntlet of matchups. These are ugly or blowout wins. If we can go into that gauntlet there with only 1 or 2 losses, we're set up in a really good position. So take the wins for what they are, and I'm going to take them.
I'd rather have 2 ugly wins than 2 pretty losses. I heard somebody say that.
Absolutely, because like you could sit there all day if we had 2 losses and picked out, well, it could have been different if that play went different or this play went different. We don't want to be talking about that. We want to be talking about ways we could improve, but even talking about ways we could improve, it's a brand new offensive coordinator, brand new defensive coordinator. We have to expect that there's going to be some growing pains, even if the roster is 95%, 90% the same. We have to expect that there's going to be some growing pains, especially in the play calling process. And I think Desai and Johnson, they're both going to come along, and it's going to be just fine. I'd way rather come out of this run of games 5-2 or 6-1 than 2-5 and looking at that stretch of matchups and being like, well, we're done.
And everybody knows that the schedule is going to be what the schedule appears to be when we get it in May. Is definitely going to be different when you get into season. Some teams are going to be like, maybe coming into the year we thought Tampa was going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be a cakewalk, obviously. Looking over some of the comments, Daniel Barry Sports Media, happy Friday. What's up, Dan? Thank you for joining us. Mr. Croc. Yeah. You don't want me to on any show talking about that fraudulent franchise. They need to move to Jersey. They need to move to Jersey. Let's get a Philly WNBA team to give us real basketball to watch in.
The good thing, LJ, is if you actually talked about it for a half hour, you would probably be a lot more honest than most Sixers people who talk about it. So, I mean, on the bright side, you're going to be blatantly obvious, and it could upset Sixers fans, but you were right about James Harden.
I've been right about that team for the last 10 years. I was right about Simmons. I was right about Fultz. I've been more right than wrong than a lot of them fans. But let's talk about a real team in the city, a team that actually knows how to win, and can get past the second round. The Sixers are the NBA's version of the Dallas Cowboys. That's what I'm going to say. Can't get past the second round.
Ouch.
All right, so let's touch base on Tampa Bay's defense a little bit. They're led by Vita Vea in the middle. Jason Kelsey talked about him the other day. He's a big guy. He's really tough. He's big. He's athletic. He's got a bunch of moves. That's going to be a big battle. Tampa plays a 3-4. They got the rookie Kalijah Kancey out of Pittsburgh. Their linebackers, really good. Devin White and Levante David and Shaquille Barrett rushing the edge. And I think the Eagles have probably I would say that the Eagles have the advantage when it comes to their offensive weapons and Goddard, Brown, Smith against the secondary, Jamel Dean, Carlton Davis, Antoine Winfield, and Ryan Neal of Tampa. But yeah, so like I think when we're matching up the skill position, like when we receivers and corners, I think the Eagles have an advantage, but they're going to have to be able to stop Shaquille Barrett. The tackles, the Eagles, and we talked about how week 1 the Eagles tackles didn't play well, but week 2 they played really well. Jordan Mailata had the highest grade out of any offensive lineman, if I'm not mistaken. But the one thing that I think Todd Bowles is going to force Jalen to do is to beat him with his arm. That's what they did in the playoff game. Now, they're not going to devise that same game plan when they played each other 2 years ago in the playoffs, but having Levante David and Devin White, which one wanted the trade? I think David wanted the trade, Levante, if I'm not mistaken. I would have went after him. If I was the Eagles, I'd have called Tampa up and tried to get him, but that's a different story for a different day. They're going to force the Jalen Hurts to beat them with his arm. Them two linebackers are quick enough that if they're going to run an RPO or Jalen's going to try to get out the pocket, they can go sideline to sideline. So it's going to be interesting what type of offensive game plan Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni devise for this game. And as Mr. Crockpot says, redemption game for Hurts from that Tampa playoff game. Hopefully, all I want is a W. I don't care if Jalen goes 9 of 25 for 100 yards and has 3 picks. If they win, I'm happy. I know fans and the media are going to be like, what's wrong with Jalen? But they got the W. They're 3-0. Who the heck cares? But I don't care how they get it done. I just want them to get that W.
And yeah, I agree. I think that winning this game is going to come down to who can make the play through the air, Baker Mayfield or Jalen Hurts. And we would hope that it's going to be Jalen Hurts because Baker Mayfield has looked like a rejuvenated quarterback, but he's still Baker Mayfield. We still know at the end of the day that this is Baker Mayfield. This is not going to be a guy who's in the MVP conversation or going to really be remotely close to like a top 10 quarterback. He's Tampa Bay had a really good team kind of already built because they had Tom Brady in the building. They were building to make runs for multiple years. And what happened when Tom Brady happened. So he's got a good team around him. The offensive line's a little banged up. We already obviously know the story about Ryan Jansen, which is heartbreaking that his career is likely over based on the injury that he suffered. But they got Tristan Wirfs out there. They got Cody Mauch, who was a guy that I really liked. Maybe it was just a hair in the missing front teeth, but there was something about that look that screamed Philadelphia Eagle to me. So I really liked him. So they got a couple guys on the offensive line who are still, you can respect, but it's definitely a shell of what it was. But defensively, yeah, they have a really good defense, and they have a very good defense when it comes to the front seven. And that's where I think, we're not going to see Kenny Gainwell or DeAndre Swift go off for big games. I don't think that this is going to be a rushing game. They're going to have to win through the air, and they're going to have to use A.J. Brown better than they've been using him. They're going to have to use Dallas Goedert way better than they've been using him, not right at the line of scrimmage and let him do it all from there. Because like you said, these are pretty athletic linebackers. These are guys that if they're not going after the quarterback, they're going to be able to catch Dallas Goedert. They're going to be able to catch some of these guys if you throw it only a couple yards and hope that someone can produce on the ground. So this is definitely going to be a much different game plan than last week. And we're definitely going to have to see a lot more than what we've seen out of Jalen and his receiving weapons this week.
So the one thing I like, we're not going to see where Jalen Hurts, average depth, when they're throwing the football. He's not going to be throwing a bunch of passes behind the line of scrimmage. He's not going to have Brock Purdy where his average depth is like -3 yards, it seems like, because all they do is throw screens with Purdy. Like, he's going to throw the ball down the field. Now, Dean and Davis, they are pretty good. Now, like I said, I like our talent at the receiver position, at least our first two, more than I like the talent of Tampa. But if the Eagles offensive line can't block the front seven, that's where we have the issue. That's where being able
I worry more about the interior with Vita Vea, because we talked about it on the last 2 or 3 episodes that we had concerns about the interior of the offensive line. While yes, we have Lane Johnson looking like Lane Johnson, and Jordan Mailata just graded out as having the highest graded game ever by a left tackle per PFF. you do have to worry about the interior of the offensive line where the issues have been, whether it's like we've said, whether it's Cam Jurgens and trying to compensate for Cam Jurgens and maybe him not being so comfortable at right guard, whether whether there's something affecting Landon Dickerson or Kelsey or Jurgens as far as an injury, who knows? But they're just not looking like the interior of the Eagles offensive line that we've been used to. And that would concern me the most, because if that opens up or if they continue to struggle, it just makes the day a lot harder for the tackles as well.
Yes, Mr. Crockbox says expect Tampa to stack the box. I think Brian Johnson is going to pass a lot more than many Eagles fans want this week. Yeah, and also with Kenny Gainwell coming back, like if the Eagles are going to run the football, they better not go away from DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift's your best weapon at the running back position. And again, I'm not asking for him to have 30 carries. I just want him to be the primary focus. Let him be RB1 and let Gainwell come in. We've talked about it time and time again where Gainwell is a good complementary back. He's not the lead back. That's DeAndre Swift.
If you want to split it 60-40, 70-30, I'm okay with that. But if it's 50-50 or anything in favor of Kenny Gainwell, Brian Johnson, I don't care how many times Brian Johnson throws the ball. It is a disservice to DeAndre Swift and the reason you brought him in. I get it. He has the injury concerns. He's had it in the past, and that's probably one of the reasons Detroit took Gibbs and then kind of abandoned ship with him. But to the same point, you don't have to completely move away from a guy because of his injury history or manages carries to the point that Kenny Gainwell is your number one running back.
There's not enough alcohol in the Mr. Crockpot household if Gainwell gets more carries than Swift on Monday. You're not lying there.
There's enough alcohol in anyone's house to handle that.
Man, the airwaves in Philadelphia, if the Eagles give Gainwell more carries and they lose, woo-wee. The airways, the talking heads in Philly on Tuesday, it's not going to be a safe place for Nick Sirianni and the Eagles offense. This is the week where they got to try to get Dallas Goedert involved. They find a way to exploit the middle of the field if possible. And again, we talked about the linebackers for Tampa. Also, Antoine Winfield Jr. is pretty good at safety. So like their defense is good. And again, we've mentioned all the names: Vita Vea, Barrett, David, White, Antoine Winfield. Like they have guys. The Eagles are gonna have to be patient. Look, the first drive they might go 3 and out. It might be like a 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of offense to start. They're gonna have to adjust. They're gonna have to make changes to the game plan if necessary to get the offense going. The first 2 games have been for the Eagles have been within 1-score games. I'm expecting, kind of a spoiler for prediction. I'm expecting another close game. Like it's not last year's Eagles team where they were blowing teams out left and right, where Jalen was out in the fourth quarter and we saw Gardner Minshew. It's not going to be like that. Maybe until the end of the year. Who knows when get the Arizona Giants at the end of the year. That 3 games to finish off the season. But hopefully they're just able to keep enough distance to where fourth quarter, 2 minutes to go, and if Baker has the ball, if he goes down the field, they can kick a field goal to win or tie or whatever. We don't want that. We're about to jump over to the Eagles defense, and I'm still we're getting healthier on the back end, which is good, but I'm still, skeptical about how this Eagles defense is going to play.
Yeah, I mean, and it's worth noting that their right outside linebacker, Joe Tryon, actually leads the team in sacks, and that's probably because the attention goes to Vita Vea and Devin White and Levante David. And then their rookie nickelbacker, Christian Isian, actually leads the team in interceptions with 2 and is actually probably leading the league or very close to leading the league in interceptions with those 2. So, like, even the names that we don't really know that well are worth respecting because there's so much attention given to the other people. You're throwing away from Carlton Davis probably, or throwing away from Antoine Winfield, and throwing into these other people who actually are making plays, or you're putting all your attention on Shaq Barrett and Devin White and Levante David, and then Joe Tryon's making plays. So, I mean, you definitely have to respect more than just the names that are on the Tampa Bay defense, because if you put too much attention to single people, these other players aren't just scrubs. They're actually making plays and doing things. Well, they may be scrubs in our eyes just because we don't know the names, but they are making plays. So it's worth noting that.
Mr. Crockpot says, I wonder if this is the week where we start to see teams drop 8 back. Blitzing Hurts has not worked. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Minnesota play a lot of 8, like drop 8 men back? That's why they rushed for 200 plus yards. So it is hard to defend this Eagles offense because Hurts has the ability to throw the football, but then they also have the ability with that offensive line to just run it down your throat. They don't mind going 16 plays to score a touchdown. Obviously, we would all prefer let's get a 3-play, 75-yard, 50-yard touchdown pass to A.J. Brown. We would love that. But as long as they're putting the ball in the end zone, I don't care how it gets done. 16-play drive will shorten a game, get one less offensive possession potentially to the opposing team as long as you're not turning the ball over. So that's where I think it's going to be interesting the type of game plan that Brian Johnson comes up with. Are they going to come out prioritizing running the football early and then go to the pass? Or are they going to come out, let's throw the ball, get Jalen in comfortable, get Jalen in rhythm, and then go from there to see what the Tampa Bay defense does to adjust to that and to react to that?
Yeah, to me, I don't care. Like we've said it before on this show, we don't rushing isn't going. If you're rushing for, if you're rushing 30 or 40 times in a game, you're not gonna win a Super Bowl that way. It's a passing league. But at the end of the day, it's just like that game against Raiders where Derek Carr had the highest completion percentage ever. You take what you're given, and that's what happened against the Vikings. You can drop 8 back, you can drop 7 back, you can do whatever you want. If we're going to run all over you all night, just like you said, I am fine with having 40 minutes of possession and scoring 14 or 17 points and the other team not being able to score on us and scoring only 10 or something. I'm fine with that type of game because you're playing into what the team wanted you to play into. And we know that we can win that way. To me, it's just a matter of as long as I'm not seeing it forced. If we come out and we're just going 3 and out, Brian Johnson trying to throw the football and force Jalen Hurts to throw the football and no rushing, that would frustrate me. If we're going 3 and out because we're just rushing, and it's not working out, that would frustrate me. But if it's something that you're just being given, like the Minnesota Vikings essentially gave to us on Thursday night, I'm never going to get mad about that. And it's going to be an ugly win. And everyone's going to be like, oh my goodness, this offense. But if that's what we're going to do, we're going to take what a team is going to give us to win. It's just a different strategy than last year. Last year, we came out guns a-blazing and it worked. But it's not always going to work that way. And we already know last year, and a lot of people have said it in the media, the national media, not the Philly media, but in the national media, a lot of people have said the Eagles can be just as good as last year, but not have the same amount of wins or not have the same look in offense or defense, because it is truly possible that we have an equally good team, but based on the shift in strength of schedule and how teams decide to play us, it could look a lot different. But we could still end up being that Eagles team that is it's clear teams respect the Eagles, and it's showing in the game plan that they're trying to implement against us.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens when it comes to the Eagles offense. Let's jump over to the Eagles defense. Let's see, Todd Bowles will expose Hurts. Maybe not. This is Hurts is a different player than he was 2 years ago in that playoff game. I think we can all agree with that.
He's not the guy that they were trash talking on the Bucs sideline.
Yeah, no.
I can tell you right now, this is not the same Jalen Hurts.
Definitely
that
not.
Couldn't read defenders or anything. Last year showed enough that Jalen Hurts is not that guy that they saw 2 years ago.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Eagles defense. Jalen Carter is as advertised. He's leading all defensive tackles in pressures, and he's a rookie. He's got the same. Does he have the same amount of pressures or one less pressure than Micah Parsons, who the national media is fawning over as usual? Even though I think J.J. Watt or T.J. Watt is better, but that's a different story for a different day. But again, that's nothing against Micah Parsons. It's just I think Watt is a better player right now. But we get Bradbury back, Reed Blankenship back. We'll get another week of Cunningham and Nick Morrow at the linebacker position. Hopefully,
although we hope that Nolan Smith sees some more share of time,
sees a little bit more playing time. Another week of comfort with the cast for Hassan Reddick. This could be a Hassan Reddick, breakout party. He needs to get his name on the stat sheet, which he hasn't yet, but that's not against him. I think he's still feeling it out. He's playing hurt. But the Eagles. This is where a game where Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox should be able that middle of the Tampa offensive line, with the center Robert Hainsley, left guard Matt Filer, and then right guard Cody Malk. That's a spot where I think the Eagles can take advantage of Tampa's offense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Like we kind of spoke about it, and I will pull up the comment from Mr. Crockpot as well, because he said I really like the Eagles' chances against the Tampa Bay O line. The Tampa Bay O line is definitely more inexperienced because they lost their top set. If Brian Jansen was in this, it's a completely different conversation. Like that's how much he changes an offensive line, because you completely go away from the interior of the offensive line and hope you can attack the tackles. But that's the thing is there's a really good chance that we can take advantage. I think both teams have a really good chance to take advantage of just bringing a lot of pressure and putting a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. And I know Mr. Crockpot was talking about, do they drop 8? I think that, you have to find some sort of balance, because dropping 7 or 8 guys back in coverage, it wasn't working for Minnesota. I don't think it would work for Tampa Bay. You have to find some sort of balance between the two strategies, so that you're not completely giving up the run, but you're not completely giving up the pass. And this feels like the type of defense, because this defense is way better than Minnesota's. And in my personal opinion, this defense is way better. So like, I think you have the players there that you can find that balance, and they will be forced to respect both games. But I definitely agree on that front. Like the interior of the offensive or defensive line should do really well. I really hope this is a Hassan Reddick game. I would love to see Nolan Smith. Like he's seen I think 7 snaps and 4 snaps. It would be nice to see him. Like I get if you want to, wean a guy into it, but I mean, eventually to get the comfort of being at the NFL level, you can't just put him out, bring him out for 10 snaps, put him out. Like you can't keep doing that. You're never going to get comfortable in this league. If you're in, you're out, you're in, you're out. So, I mean, getting him up to like around 15 or 20 snaps would really be nice to see, and seeing what he can do. And I mean, there could be growing pains with Nolan Smith too. Like it's obvious that there's probably going to be some growing pains, but we really need to see him out there more.
I mean, they
would
did.
Be
I
nice
think they
to see
drafted
Reddick's.
him. They drafted him to be a mini Hassan Reddick, and it's kind of tough to put both of them out there at the same time potentially, especially when you have Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham. Like
you can't take Josh Sweat off the field right now. That's exactly the issue. So if your hope is to swap,
there's limited snaps for Nolan Smith, but I'd much rather Nolan Smith have snaps over Derek Barnett. Get whatever snaps you're going to give Derek Barnett, give to Nolan Smith. But like you can't take Hassan Reddick and you can't take Josh Sweat off the field. So, whenever you do, those snaps should go to Nolan Smith and let him get some experience.
I mean, I guess you could get creative, risky but creative, if you want to pull off, a Morrow or a Cunningham and try and go really heavy on rushing. I mean, but they did use Nolan Smith in off-ball coverage a little bit. We don't want to see it. It's the same. My opinion on Smith is the same as Reddick. I don't want to see them in off-ball coverage. But I mean, you could technically kind of put him out and be like, use him in that way. But I'd rather see him used in some sort of creative way. I think if you have Sweat, Cox, Carter, Reddick, all Russian, and then you have Smith out there, that could open a door for some creative plays, bring in extra pressure. But we'll see what happens. But yeah, you can't take Josh Sweat off. You obviously can't take Hassan Reddick off. You're paying Reddick to be out there almost 100% of snaps. Josh Sweat's playing way too well to be taken off the field. So you have to find a way to get creative with the linebackers, which, I mean, Morrow had a good game. Cunningham had a really good game, but neither warrant being out there all the time if you have some sort of creative package that could give you an upper hand or some sort of advantage. So it'll be interesting to see, but it would be nice to see Nolan Smith out there more. Derek Barnett does not. I'm fine with Derek Barnett seeing 5 snaps a game. Derek Barnett at the end of the season is no longer an Eagle. So to me, it is about Nolan Smith and making sure he can be comfortable and he can be the guy who can step into that role as a backup or as a rotational piece that can get out there 15 or 20 times a game and do something on 3 or 4 occasions, rushing the passer or whatever you want him to do. So I think that's important. And it is only week 2. So maybe we are overreacting to their usage of a rookie, but we have seen the usage of a guy like, well, Nolan Smith and Sidney Brown, to me, both of those usages is extremely questionable because the safeties have done nothing to warrant not putting Sidney Brown on that football field either. So I would like to see both Smith and Brown out there a lot more, maybe not a lot more this week, but more this week. They've deserved. I think they warrant at least seeing them 15 to 20 snaps a game. Don't wait till the end of the season to do this. You've got to get them comfortable now, equally as later in the season.
Mr. Crockpot says, how about Jordan freaking Davis? His performance through 2 games has been nothing short of remarkable. He has been way better than he was last year. And I think as a rookie coming into the NFL, especially at his size, like there's a natural like shock to the system of the expectations for, what you should be doing. He's a big guy. And granted, like his measurables and his numbers at the combine were ridiculous for somebody his size. But when you're going through an NFL training camp and then you're going through an entire season, you eventually hit the rookie wall, which we're hoping that doesn't happen to Jalen Carter. But like he kind of had that shock to the system moment last year. He came into this year way more better prepared. Whether it was, I mean, he was in way better. He looks like he's in way better shape, and he's out there. He's throwing 300-pound men out the way. He's good against the run. We're not expecting him to be the pass rusher that Jalen Carter is, but he's still getting after the quarterback when necessary. So yeah, I mean, his improvement from last year is remarkable and nothing short of amazing.
I just think he's overshadowed because Fletcher Cox is having this rejuvenation. Jalen Carter is everything and more from the advertisement that we had. Milton Williams is even doing really well. So I think he's just being overshadowed, but it's because as a whole, the interior defensive line has been so good through 2 weeks. And I hope it continues. Like you said, we don't want to see Jalen Carter hit the wall. And I don't think he will because Jalen Carter, his technique is so flawless. His ability, he could use power. If you're going to stop his technique, he can use power, but his technique, he makes people miss like he's a running back. Like he's making people like 300-pound men completely whiff and pancake themselves as he's rushing at their quarterback. Like you have to respect this. As the Eagles fans, we see Jordan Davis and we say, we see you, Jordan, but the national media is going to fixate on Jalen Carter because he's everything is advertised and more. So you have to respect that this whole interior defensive line is doing amazing. And maybe that's also because we haven't seen Hassan Reddick do what Hassan Reddick can do. Like this defensive line is doing so well, and I think it can even take a step up and do even better as the season progresses.
I want to talk about Tampa's the skill position players. Baker Mayfield's their quarterback, Rashad White at running back, and then they got a good pair of receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Trey Palmer's the third receiver. Kate Otten is the tight end. With Avonte Maddox being out, Mario Goodrich is probably going to be the nickel corner unless they decide to move Bradbury inside and let Joe play outside on some snaps. This is probably a spot where if I'm Tampa, you put Mike Evans in the slot, you put Chris Godwin in the slot, have them go up against Mario Goodrich. I would take Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in that battle 99 times out or 100 times out of 100. I don't think Mario Goodrich stands a chance to go up against either of those two. And then that's where Sean Desai has to get creative in, what does he do with the safeties? Do they do a blanket coverage on Evans or Godwin, whoever's in the slot? I don't know what they're going to do, but I would not be shocked to see either of them guys in the slot multiple times, if not majority of the game, going up against Goodrich. And if that happens and Goodrich isn't performing well, then the Eagles are going to have to maybe you put Bradbury in, like I mentioned, and have Joe play outside to get your best players out on the field, especially at the corner position.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like I said earlier in the episode, like this team was built to continue to contend with the right quarterback in play. Like Tom Brady probably could have contended with this. Obviously in this NFC South probably could have been the best team. I say that now. They got 3-2-0 teams, but I mean, I don't think Atlanta's all as good as what they look, and I don't think New Orleans is as good as they look either. Nor do I think Tampa's as good as they look either. But to the same point, you have to respect it because they're 2-0 and they've accomplished what they've accomplished. But Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are really good. Chris Godwin worked the slot in the past. and he did it fairly well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Godwin there. Evans, I don't think you move into the slot. I think like having Evans and Godwin or Otton in the slot, it just doesn't make sense. It's like a jumbo package with tight ends almost. But I think like Evans will
Evans
stay
also
on
has
the
speed
outside.
though.
He does, but you have to respect him on the outside. I don't think I think that respect is going to make it so that you can use Chris Godwin on the inside and get more creative with your wide receivers.
Is this another game where Darius Slay shadows like a Mike Evans? Like if he goes to the bathroom, he's going into the bathroom with him, like wherever he is out in the field, except maybe the slot. If he were to line up into the slot a couple of times, is this one where, or are we going to just see the corners play their sides and go from there?
I think that with James Bradbury back, you're not going to see the shadowing as much because you did see it last week where I think on out of 13 targets, 9 of the targets to Justin Jefferson were in Darius Slay's direction because Darius Slay followed. But you have to give that respect because you're without James Bradbury. Whereas if James Bradbury's there, you don't necessarily have to move Slay with him. But I think with James Bradbury back, they're going to be a little more lenient and kind of let them play who they're going to play. But yeah, you have to worry about the slot and what do you do? How do you even Trey Palmer? Like I don't take him over Goodrich 100 out of 100 times, but at this point, I take the wide receiver over the rookie cornerback who's just getting their first looks of true like in the NFL. Like I get it, he played in the preseason and he looks super good in the slot, but that was against second, third, and fourth string guys. So, like, no matter what, these are now guys who are on NFL teams. They made 53-man rosters for a reason. And in a passing league like this, I'm going to give the advantage to the wide receiver as the advantage is usually given to the wide receiver. So even Trey Palmer there worries me. So you're going to have to get creative with the linebackers or the safeties to try and make it a bit harder in the middle of the field and give Goodrich or Job or whoever ends up being out there a little bit of help because I don't think they're going to stick with just one cornerback all night. I think they're going to have to keep the cornerback fresh. And they may move between a couple cornerbacks and kind of see who the better guy is and get an idea of where they should go for the rest of the season because it's going to be a long haul without Avonte Maddox. You got a long season, plus hopefully a playoff run to go without Maddox. So you got to get comfortable and figure out who's going to fill that void the best.
I don't expect Rachaad White or Sean Tucker to be able to run on the Eagles, but Baker Mayfield still does have mobility. And the Eagles usually struggle with running backs, or excuse me, quarterbacks that have mobility. So that'll be interesting to see what the Eagles do with that because you don't want as much as we talk bad about Mayfield, if he can get into a rhythm and he starts completing a bunch of passes, he can start moving the ball down the field. So the Eagles are going to have to get after Mayfield. I think if I'm not mistaken, Tampa's only given up 1 sack on the year. So that'll be interesting to see if the Eagles are able to get after him and get through, Tristan Wirfs, Gadecki, and that interior offensive line to put pressure on him. You put pressure on Mayfield, he'll throw you the ball. He'll throw it up there. So hopefully the Eagles are able to get pressure on him, get hands in his face, get people in his face so that he makes a mistake or two, and you're able to get the ball down the field or get your offense the ball in short field position.
Yeah, and Rachaad White is a decent pass catcher. I mean, he's got 7 receptions for 40 yards on the year, and Baker Mayfield, like he will dump the ball off. He will go for a big shot, but he will also dump the ball off. Like he's a really good. Generally, he's a really good backup quarterback, which says something about he can probably be a decent starter. So, like, I'm not saying he's horrible. He's right in the middle of the pack there. He's with Kirk Cousins. He's with those guys. But and with this type of offense, you can trust that Baker Mayfield has a few weapons who do a few different things that you have to respect. So whether you want to, even if you don't respect Baker Mayfield, you have to respect the weapons and what they bring to the game, and that can make Baker Mayfield, as we've seen, look like a better quarterback than he is through 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. I think this is also the first time in his career he started 2-0, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of firsts for Baker.
Wouldn't be surprised. Look who he was playing for in his struggles.
When Baker signed with Tampa, again, there was a lot of kind of people scoffing at the idea of him being able to lead this team. They're 2-0 right now. Not saying that by the end of the year they're going to be a playoff team, but right now.
People were certain Kyle Trask was going to start. Like, people were certain Trask was winning that, but
Kyle Trask stinks too. So, there's a lot of bad quarterbacks in the NFL, by the way. Like, when you look at it, It's amazing how many bad quarterbacks there are. But
they're just given like a prime opportunity because a team signs a guy like Baker Mayfield or they put them in a position to think they have a chance and that they might actually be good. But yeah, Trask did not look good in the preseason. So
all right. So before we get to our prediction, give me an offensive player to watch for the Eagles and a defensive player to watch for the Eagles for this game against Tampa on Monday night.
I'm going with Dallas Goedert because I think to really open up the middle of the field and to keep the pressure off of Jalen Hurts from guys like Shaq Barrett or from anybody on that like linebacker group, you have to open up the middle of the field. That was criminal. I said it on Tuesday. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to scream it from the mountains. It's absolutely been criminal, the usage of Dallas Goedert this year. Last game, yes, he had 4 or 5 catches, but go back and look at the catches. They were all just him going off in the flat, waiting there and getting the catch at negative yardage or 1 or 2 yards and then gaining nothing out of it because they dropped 7 back. And then as soon as the throw went, everybody converged on whoever the throw went to. So it's been absolutely criminal, Goddard's usage. I get that he was a yak monster last year, but to the same point, you have to use him to open up the middle of the field. My debate was AJ Brown or Dallas Goedert because you have to start respecting those guys. And Johnson has to start incorporating them in the game plan, not forcing it, but incorporating them into the game plan and making sure that Jalen Hurts knows, yo, you got these 2 guys. We need to don't force it to anybody, but you got a lot of guys. You got a lot of weaponry. Let's get them in the position to make plays. And we saw Dallas Goedert. He can make plays. He can make big plays. And to keep some of the pressure away from Jalen Hurts, they're going to have to start using them effectively. And that can also open things up for even DeAndre Swift or Kenneth Gainwell as pass catchers. So I think they got to start using Goddard and respecting that you have Dallas Goedert there. Defensively, I think I've gone like Josh Sweat the last 2 weeks because he was so good week 1 and then he was amazing in week 2. But I am going to go on this night I'm going with Reed Blankenship. He's coming back from an injury. I think they're going to have to use him in over top. This could be one of those days where, you get a ball hawk play. He might get an interception. He's going to get a lot of tackles, I think. I think, like, I get it. This show, we haven't been the most respectful towards Reed Blankenship because we think there's better safeties out there. We think that there's better out there, and the Eagles just love their homegrown talent. We saw it with Marcus Epps. We're seeing it with Reed Blankenship. They just love that homegrown talent. But this could be one of those games where they're going to have to get creative in using him. He's probably going to have to be over top, supporting the slot, supporting whoever might be watching Mike Evans, depending on where he's playing. But I think this could be a game where Reed Blankenship really shows, he had a pretty good week 1, but I think it could be one of those games where he really steps up and shows like he's to be respected, and he's going to have his games, but he's also going to have his games where he's going to miss. But this is one of those games where I think he just got fire away, make all those tackles, and go for the ball, try and make some plays because it could be the difference.
Yeah, he needs to be in position, especially if the ball is going to go to Mike Evans on the outside. So for me, for the offensive player to watch, I'm going AJ Brown. A little frustrated last week, and again, going by his words, he wasn't frustrated at the lack of targets. But I think this has a chance to be, when you have a 1A and a 1B like the Eagles do. Last week it was Devontae. This week it could be AJ because teams are going to try to devise a game plan to stop Devontae. So I think AJ is going to have a big game. He'll have at least a touchdown. He might not get 100 yards, but he'll have 80 to 90 yards receiving. But I think AJ is due for a big game. Defensively, I'm going to go with Hassan Reddick again.
I debated Reddick.
Absent from the stat sheet the first 2 weeks. Let's let him get after. He's going to be going up against Gadecki, I guess. He's the right tackle. So that's a battle he could potentially win. And again, when you have all the talent that the Eagles have up front at the front 4, like you can't, if you're going to devise a game plan to stop Jalen Carter, somebody else is easily going to win. So if teams are going to start double teaming Jalen Carter because he's ragdolling their offensive lineman, Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick have to win. So I think Hassan Reddick finally gets on the board this week and gets a sack. So I'm going with AJ Brown and Hassan Reddick.
I hope that's multiple sacks.
I hope so.
Multiple.
Too. All right. Prediction time. I have mine written down. We're both 2-0. Last week's score, the Eagles won 34-28. You had 35-31 Eagles, so you were closer in the score prediction. But we both are undefeated in terms of picking the Eagles games. I will let you go first. Kind of break down a little bit how you think it's going to go about, and your final prediction score for Eagles Bucs.
I think it's going to be ugly again. There's that feeling inside of me, like you said earlier, it's going to be ugly. There's going to be a lot more again. The Philly media is going to go after the Eagles and be like question marks about Johnson, probably Hurts, probably Desai. I have all the feelings of it. I do think it's going to be a W, but I do respect both of these defenses. I do think it's going to be a defensive game, and it's going to have to end up being won through the air, like we've kind of been talking about. And it's going to be about who makes the better big throws. I think Jalen Hurts can make the better big throws. I'm going with 24-20 for the Eagles.
24-20.
I could never say that I trust Baker to make the big throws, and this could be the week, you know? You never know. I just don't think with Darius Slay and James Bradbury back, like the big throw could be to a slot cornerback 8 yards, 9 yards away. So
yeah. As long as hopefully the Eagles aren't playing like 10 yards off and allowing easy completions to the receivers on the outside for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, because if that's the case, then you get
we haven't really seen that yet from Desai. Like he plays off a bit, but we haven't really seen him do the Jonathan Gannon like at the sticks type defense. So I'm hoping that they continue to go with that and respect the receivers that they're playing against, but to the same point, being able to get there, get the hands on them, be aggressive, push them off their route. That is just as important as being 10 yards off and being able to see the play happening.
So this is a game that the Eagles defensive line is going to have to win, I think. Again, another close, ugly game where in the fourth quarter we're going to sit here sweating a little bit, trying to figure out what's going on, and then the Eagles will eventually come away with the win. I have the Eagles winning 21-17. Another close one, 4-point win like you have. Again, like they're not going to – again, you don't win Super Bowls in September. I said it a bunch of times on Tuesday. I'll say it again today. The Eagles don't have to be playing their best now. As long as they're playing their best December, January, February, that's what we matter, because you can't win the Super Bowl in September. Before we finish off, though, quickly, your thoughts on Trayvon Diggs' injury for Dallas. That's a big loss for them.
It's a massive loss. Like, I mean, we've given them a tough time on this show, and like I get it. Like we've said, oh, Trayvon Diggs, he can make three, he can give you 2 or 3 picks in a game. He can also give up, 1,000 yards in a season. But to the same point, like this defense was on roll. They were looking really good. Ultimately, it's a massive loss, and the Philly fan base has actually been pretty good about it. But we should be. You never want to see somebody get injured, and you want to see teams at their peak and doing their best. So it sucks to see a guy tear his ACL and have that injury happen. And now, now Cowboys fans could sit there and say, well, we didn't have Trayvon Diggs. What did you expect us to do? So it breaks my heart. That'll be my only dig at them, but yeah.
They did trade for Stephon Gilmore, though, like in the offseason. So they do have another decent corner, but I was looking forward to AJ Brown, Devontae Smith against Trayvon Diggs and Stephon Gilmore. And Braden Mann, the Eagles' new punter. We focus more on the punter. We did with Siposs, but we a lot of people don't focus on the holding aspect of it. We knew that Elliott trusted Siposs. Do we have any fear of Mann holding for Elliott and that potentially costing the Eagles some points on a field goal?
I hope not. I would guess that they probably spent all of practice with Mann holding the football instead of practicing his punting, because you can't be. I mean, Siposs was pretty bad as a punter at times, so you can't get any worse than that. So, I mean, hopefully they found someone through practice. I'm guessing they didn't just put Mann in there to hold. I'm guessing they've done a little bit of practicing and stuff with other guys, and they found a holder that they can trust. But I'm not so worried about a holder. Although, I mean, I think it would. I screenshotted the stat. I got to pull this stat up about Jake Elliott because you were saying that he could be one of the greatest. He could end up going down as the greatest Eagles kicker of all time and beat out Akers. This stat was Jake Elliott is one of only 5 kickers in NFL history to make multiple 61-plus yard field goals in their career. He joins a list of Brett Maher, Sebastian Janikowski, Matt Prater, and Justin Tucker. So
it's a good list to be on. He has a chance. He does have a chance to be very good chance, and he still probably has 5. I don't know how old is Elliott? 26, something like that. 27. I mean, he has at least probably 5 years left of high quality kicking, and it should most likely, unless his leg falls off, should be with the Philadelphia Eagles. All right, we both have the Eagles winning. Tune in Monday Night Football. The Eagles have the first game of the doubleheader. Well, sort of kind of doubleheader because they start an hour apart. And the game in Tampa between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Greenhour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. And follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. Thank you all for tuning in to this week's preview episode of the Kelly Green Hour.
Fly, Eagles, fly.